Folks, this is JC one more time. I have another little short story to tell, and this is a part of my story that began in Modesto, California. I met the man named Blackie in Bakersfield. We stayed together up into Los Angeles and over into Colton, and this was a very wonderful man. He kind of took me under his wing, so to speak. He was up in a middle-aged man, maybe in his 40s, I don't know. I was only 13, and of course it was obvious to him that I had no idea what I was going to do next. So anyhow, he helped me out more than I can say, and I was very fond of him when I finally left him there. Anyhow, the story went on, and I got to Colton on the journey, and then from Colton I left and went to El Paso, and that story was the man with the horsehair coat. And then from El Paso, I had the story on to Odessa, and that finished this trip. Well, in Colton, there's a little incident that happened in Colton that I didn't tell about, and I'd like to tell it because that will finish this trip. And so I may repeat a little bit of the last story and maybe go in a little bit of the one after that. But I want to get this incident in here, and so without further ado now, I'll go ahead and start. I'm on the webcam, and I hope this picture comes out better than some of the others did. It seems like the webcam isn't as good as the movie camera, but with this I can read right off of my monitor, and I have the letters big, so I thought I wouldn't wear glasses this time. Somebody asked me, "Hey, JC, you know, stories are okay, but we can't see your eyes. The glasses, you have glasses on, and the light reflects off the glasses." So I made the script on this very big so I wouldn't need the glasses to read it. Oh, and also I didn't want to seem like, you know, everything be exactly the same. So on this one I do have my poem reading, blue sweatshirt, short sleeve sweatshirt. It's short sleeve. I bought it in the summertime and cut the sleeves out of it. That seemed like, that made a lot of sense to me at the time and still does. And also my Doctor Who scarf, I don't know, it's 30 or 40 feet long. Not really, but it's pretty long. And I wanted to put this little bolo tie on there. Just sort of as a dressing, so I wouldn't get too, I wouldn't look too bare and dull and drab. Anyhow, after all this, I'll go on with the story now, and I'll put the camera down out of the way so I can read off here, and we'll start. We left Los Angeles, Blackie and I, and we came to Colton. And down a dirt road a ways, there was a shed with hay in it. We spent the night there. After we got there, Blackie went into town after something for us to eat and to snipe some more cigarette butts. He came back with a case of Gerber's shredded prunes, baby food, and that's what we had for dinner. Luckily, there were no ill effects from the prunes during the night. And so the next morning, we walked in along the railroad tracks and came to the outskirts of town, to a hobo jungle. It was a pretty good sized hobo jungle. There were quite a few people there. And it says it was a popular place because of the shade the trees and the bushes gave in the hot daytime, and because it was away from town and any houses or buildings. And then I told you there were a number of people already there with a fire going and water heating in a large 5-gallon can. There was coffee brewing, and we were offered a cup, which we accepted. We still had our cans and our spoons that we had gotten in Los Angeles. Blackie talked with the men. It was obvious some of the men were acquainted with him. He seemed to be pretty well known among the hobos. I was again asked how old I was. It seems like everybody except the lady at the bakery would ask me how old I was. Blackie told me, and this is the beginning of the episode that I left out in the middle of the story. Blackie told me that I should go to town and scrounge something to put in the pot for stew. He told me the store owners in this town didn't much care for hobos, and I could probably get more than the others could because of my youth. He described to me where the grocery store and the meat market were, and told me to go to the back where old food was discarded and get vegetables and meat to make some stew. So I headed for town. When I got to town, I drew a lot of stares from people. I guess I was quite a sight by then. It was pretty obvious I was a hobo, a beau, because of how dirty I was. As I walked along toward the grocery store, a new car pulled up beside me and stopped. Seated in the car were a man and a little girl. The man motioned me over to his side of the car. He asked me if I was on the road, and I told him yes, I was. Then he asked me if I would like to earn some money, and I said yes, I would. And what would I have to do? He said he was building a house and he needed someone to scrape the paint from the window panes with a razor blade. When I agreed to do it, he spread some newspaper over the back seat on which I would sit so I wouldn't get the seats dirty. I don't blame him because I really was a dirty mess by then. We drove to his house and he showed me what to do. Just go around to the windows with the razor blade and be very careful not to scratch them, and scrape all the paint from around the edges where they had painted the window trim and paint got onto there. And I worked, it was about 9 o'clock then, and I worked until around noon, till I finished. Then he paid me $1.65 and he took me back to town and let me out. Well, the first thing I did was go into the grocery store and buy a loaf of bread and a package of cigarettes. Then I went to the back of the store and got vegetables out of the garbage can there. And a garbage can doesn't sound very good, but it was a garbage can. Then I went to the meat market. The only thing I could find there were pieces of fish, so I took some fish heads and went back to the hobo jungle. When I walked into the camp, Blackie was there to meet me, and I got a royal ass chewing. I'm telling you, he was really mad. He was really mad at me, and he asked me where I had been. I told him, and he said I should have let someone know where I would be. He said they'd call the police station, and they'd call the hospital looking for me because I hadn't come back when I was expected. He said everyone there was worried about me. Then when he saw I had a loaf of bread and a package of cigarettes, I got another chewing out. He said the bread was all right, but I should never buy ready-rolled cigarettes. He explained that I could buy roll-your-own sacks of tobacco like Bull Durham or Duke's Mixture. I could buy 4 of these at a nickel a sack for what I had to pay for a package of ready rolls, and of course they would last a lot longer than the ready rolls did. Well, I agreed, and when he was finished educating me, he called it, we added the vegetables and the fish heads to the stew pot, and we let it boil for an hour or so. We let it boil, and an hour or so later, we had fish head stew, and it was very, very, very good. And I'm not crazy about fish, but it was absolutely delicious. Now, this was my 3rd day on the road, and this next part I've already told in a prior story. I met a lot of hobos in this hobo jungle, and each of them had a story to tell. I told about one who was on the run from the law back east. He didn't tell me what he was accused of, and I remember being a little bit scared and hoping that it wasn't murder. Then I told about the other that had an unhappy family life. He had a wife and a couple of kids back home in Oregon, and he said he'd been back there some time ago, but it seems like everyone was happier when he was gone, so to keep peace in the family and keep his family happy, he had left again, and he hadn't seen him since then. And the other was the man I told you about. It seemed to be now 70, doesn't seem very old since I'm 74, but then 70, he looked to be at least 70 years old. And he had a pure long white beard, reached all the way down to his belt. He'd probably never shaved since 1929 when he left New York City after the stock market crash of 1929. I think it was October of 1929 when it crashed, and he lost everything he had, and millions that he had, he lost in the stock market. Anyhow, I told you about all that already, and then the fact that he headed west, started 2 or 3 times to jump from the 6th or 7th floor of the building where he had his offices, but he decided not to in the end, and he came west, and he had been on the road ever since for 20 years. This is 1949 now. When I'm in Colton, and the stock market crash was in, I'm pretty sure it was October of 1929, and never had a job since then. He didn't want one, didn't need one, never needed one. He was much happier than he had ever been. So I told you about all this in the next episode. That was the man with the horsehair coat, so I won't go back into that. I just wanted to get this little incident into here about my day in Colton, and so it would finish out this entire story. Now, from the beginning, from the journey onto this little incident, and then the man with the horsehair coat, and then on to Odessa. That pretty well takes care of my entire trip from Modesto, California, to go to see my dad and my brother and my sister in Odessa, Texas. It was 1949. I was 13 years old. Frankly, I think I grew up quite a bit on that trip. I hope I learned more than just how to ride on a freight train from it, and I certainly hope you enjoy these stories, and I'll have some more to tell in the future, but not about this particular trip. Thank you very much for listening. This is JC, and I hope you enjoyed these stories. Well, this is JC back just for a little quickie in my last story, the incident in Colton. There was another little incident that I wanted to mention in that actually it happened a year later, but it is part of this story. So I'm going to put this in. I'll make it very quick so I don't draw it out too long. After this was over with and I went back to California, my mother and my stepfather and I, the very next year, went down south to a town called Chowchilla. Around Chowchilla, they grow a lot of cotton, and we would go down there every year at a certain time of the year when the cotton was ready to pick, and we'd pick cotton. And this particular time, we had gone to Chowchilla, and then we headed out west on a highway from Chowchilla, just a few miles. There's a big general store there. And we were going to go on over to a place called, I think it was 5 Points or Mendota, anyhow, a place where there's a little tent village where we could stay while we picked cotton. And but we went in this store, like a big general store. It had 2 gas pumps out front and just everything you can think of for sale inside: groceries, hardware, clothing, just about anything you want you could find there. So anyhow, we went inside there, and we were looking around. My mother and my stepfather, Vernon. My little girl remembered that his name was Vernon. I think I mentioned it a long time ago. She remembers things very well. That's Tina, my little girlfriend. Anyhow, we were walking around inside, and I heard a voice say, "Hey, kid, how you doing?" And I looked over, and this man was there, and he said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "I sure do." And it was Blackie. And he came over to me, and I shook hands with him, and he pulled me to him and gave me a big hug. And my mother and my stepfather, they didn't know what to think about this, but I had mentioned Blackie. And so I called him over, and I said, "This is the man I was telling you about that helped me so much. This is Blackie." And my mother, of course, she thanked him very much. Thank you very much for helping my baby. I was always her baby, even when she was 91 years old. Before she went to heaven, I was still her baby. That's what she called me. And that was the incident. A year later, just some wonderful coincidence that we happened to run across Blackie at the general store out just west of Chowchilla. And that's the last time I ever saw Blackie. And thank you very much. I'm going to add this on to the end. I just couldn't finish this story without this incident. Thank you very much. This is JC.